Guys, what's going on? I hope you guys are well. I hope you guys are staying safe. So guys, there's been a lot of talk on Facebook, in Facebook groups. Guys, if you're not in Facebook groups, I've got a Facebook group that's got about 60,000 members. Join my Facebook group. It's called Boxing Fans. And in my group and many other groups that I'm part of, there's been a rhetoric being spinning around that Canelo's now ducking Errol Spence. And I just feel like people just look for a narrative in order to say who's Canelo ducking, and look for reasons to criticize Canelo and why he's not fighting this guy or that guy. They'll probably say Errol Spence is a slick guy that Canelo's avoiding as well, even though Errol Spence's style is nothing slick about it, but they'll probably say that's a style he's avoiding as well. Absolutely absurd. People just love to make out like Canelo's ducking everyone. Like you hear some rumors that, or not even rumors, okay, it might have been legit, they may have generally offered him that, but Errol Spence is a welterweight. You need to read between the lines. Errol Spence is a welterweight, Canelo Alvarez is a super middleweight. There's 3 weight divisions between them. Has anyone in the history moved up 3 weight classes? Now, the deal that was offered was 164 to fight Errol Spence, right? At 164. Canelo Alvarez did an interview and said, I'm willing to fight Errol Spence at 168. He goes, why do I have to go to 164? Now, Canelo's the king, right? The king doesn't come to you. You have to go to the king. Right? Errol Spence don't bring anything to the table. Like, look, I'll take that back in the sense that if Canelo fought Errol Spence, that would be, bar the Golovkin fight, I think it's bigger than the 3rd Golovkin fight, but the 1st and 2nd one were massive. That would be the biggest fight that Canelo would ever be involved in. I think that would be the biggest fight in boxing. However, I will say this, Canelo's the A side in that fight. So you can't dictate to the A side how the terms should be. Canelo fights at 168, so you'd have to meet him at 168. Now, for me, do I think Canelo should go to 164 to fight Errol Spence? I think he should. Because to me, I know a lot of people say that he can't make 164. Of course he can. Or 160, of course he can. If he like, Canelo's fighting at weight classes where he doesn't belong. He's not a 175 pounder. He's not even a 168 pounder. There's guys at 168 that are way bigger than him. Canelo can make 164 easily. He could probably make 160 easily. I'm telling you, Canelo's not that big a guy where he can't make these weight classes. Of course he can. Now, does he not want to take the risk because he doesn't know how he'll feel back down there? That's another thing. But he can make the weight without question easily. He can make 164, no problem. And I think if that fight is offered at 164, he should take it. Because for me, I can't see how Spence wins that fight. How is Spence going to win that fight? And to be honest, that's probably the easiest 55 million he's going to... Like, I don't want to disrespect Spence. He's a great fighter. But I just can't see, as great as he is, beating a guy that's at that kind of weight. Especially as good as Canelo. Like, there's a case to be made that even if they were the same size, Canelo would win. So, the fact that Canelo's so much bigger, how the hell is Spence going to win that fight is beyond me. It's not like Canelo's a guy with no skills. He's some trash fighter. Canelo's a top fighter. So, I don't see how Spence wins that fight, to be honest. So, I don't know why Spence would even be entertaining that. Now, the only reason I could say he's entertaining that for a payday, because there's no way he beats Canelo Alvarez. Trust me. I've had some Spence fans come on to me and say, Imran, one of my members in my group, and he also watches some of my videos, Habib Rashid's a big Errol Spence fan. And he thinks that this would be a competitive fight. I disagree. I don't think Spence would have any chance against Canelo. He wouldn't. Canelo's too big, and Spence has a style which is there to bully you. He's strong. He backs you up. He pushes you back. You can't do that against a bigger man. Hence why I don't think Spence has moved up yet. I don't know whether Spence is going to move up that many weight classes because I don't know how effective. You see, moving up weight is a very difficult thing, especially when you have a style like Errol Spence, right? Because Errol Spence's style is a style which he uses because he's big at the weight he's at. Now, you take away Errol Spence's advantage of being the bigger guy at the weight, I don't know how effective he'd be with the style that he's got. Because Errol Spence, for me, is best when he's a pressure fighter, bullying guys. That's not going to work against bigger men because they can push you off, push you back. They also hit harder. So, Errol Spence, he showed me he can box against Mikey Garcia. But again, he had a lot of physical advantages over Mikey Garcia, which he won't have against some of the bigger men. Like, the advantage he had against Mikey Garcia, he won't have against Canelo. So could he just, and Errol Spence don't come across as a fighter who can just box on the outside and beat someone like Canelo, because Errol Spence don't have the quickest feet in the world. So for me, that would be a horrible matchup for Errol Spence. Horrible matchup. For me, that would be dangerous and probably dangerous to his health. And we've already seen guys move up and they get battered. You know, it's very difficult to beat a guy that's way bigger than you and that's basically on the same kind of skill level as you, right? And he's in his prime. So it's not like Canelo's kind of slightly past it. You know, even then it would be a difficult fight. But the fact that he's in his prime gives Spence literally zero chance. And I like Spence, but I don't see how he beats Canelo Alvarez. You know, and I think Spence, for me, has got a fight there with Crawford, which is a monster fight, which is a legacy fight. And then he's got to see what he's got to look, because I understand for Spence, there's not many big fights, because Spence has already said that, you know, if Jamel Charlo is his friend, so that probably is not going to happen. So what fight is there that's really big for Errol Spence, bar the Canelo fight? There isn't really any big fights on the horizon. The Crawford fight's the only one. But then after that, if he is to beat or lose Crawford, what's there next for Spence? Does he just stay at welterweight and defend his title and become a welterweight great? Or does he move up and look to become a monster at the next? Because the weight class above for Spence ain't going to be easy. You got guys like Fundora. You got guys like, you know, Charlo, Castano. You know, they're not easy fights, man. They're big guys. They're strong guys. You know, they're big and strong guys. So I don't really see how. I don't really see how Errol Spence is going to be able to adapt in those weight divisions with the size of those guys. Because Tony Harrison, for example, look how big he is. You know, so the weight. See this. The move from 147 to 154 is a big jump up. Even for someone as good as Errol Spence, it's not going to be easy. But I do think he beats a lot of the 154 pounders, even though he's not a huge guy. But I think that might be his limit. I don't know whether he can move up to 160 and challenge for a middleweight world title. That's why I think the fight with Canelo is a total mismatch, because how's he going to beat Canelo? How's he going to beat Canelo with the way he fights? I just don't see how he beats Canelo. But yeah, this Canelo ducking narrative is nonsense. You know, Canelo's fighting Bivol. If we match up Bivol and Spence together, who wins? Bivol. So Canelo is fighting a tougher fight, right, than Spence. Spence isn't a tough fight. Spence is a guy that's coming up. That would be seen as an easy fight for Canelo, or a much easier fight. Dimitri Bivol is a big guy. He's way bigger than Canelo, and he's got great skills. And his skill set, look, Errol Spence's skill set is something that Canelo would like. Dimitri Bivol's skill set is something that Canelo doesn't like, and he's bigger. So I don't really see how Canelo takes easy routes. I think even Max Kellerman said Dimitri Bivol would be the last guy that Canelo would want to fight if he's ducking guys. He's the last guy. You know, that narrative about Canelo ducking people is absolute rubbish, because you wouldn't. Why would you go and fight Bivol? If Canelo was all about fighting weaker competition, he should have fought Benavidez and Charlo, because Dimitri Bivol is horrible for Canelo. For me, when I'm looking at it, studying Dimitri Bivol like I have, for me, that's a horrible fight. That's not a good fight for Canelo. If he wants to keep up his winning streak, that's not a good fight. That's a fight that, you know, he could lose. But Canelo wants to take the risk and he wants to prove he's great. He wants to take that challenge. You know, fighting Charlo and Benavidez, that would be easy. Fighting Bivol isn't easy. Fighting Bivol is dangerous. And fighting Spence would be easy. Especially comparing it to fighting Bivol. Spence, I don't understand, like, people even think that's even a fight. Do you honestly think that Spence... There's people out there that think that Spence can beat Canelo. That's absurd. Spence literally has no chance. Spence has as much chance of beating Canelo than Canelo has of beating Usyk. They both have similar chances, and it's slim to none. You know, I know some of you came at me and said, no, well, Canelo would have a chance. No, he wouldn't have a chance against Usyk. And Spence would have no chance against Canelo. The size difference is massive. And what you got to understand is, just like the size differences for Canelo moving up and fighting Usyk, it's the same for Spence. Because for smaller guys moving up that much weight, right, it's a big jump up, man. You know, Errol Spence is a big welterweight, but that doesn't mean he can fight at super middleweight. You know, you look at when Errol Spence was with Benavidez. Remember, Errol Spence and Benavidez were standing next to each other. Benavidez looked massive compared to... Benavidez is a big super middleweight, so it's probably not good. But you stand Caleb Plant next to Errol Spence, and I guarantee you Caleb Plant would look massive compared to him. Even in terms of size, in terms of height, everything. He'd be massive. Errol Spence is not a big super middleweight. So putting him in with Canelo, it's a mismatch. It's a mismatch, unfortunately. And as much as I like Errol Spence, it's a mismatch. He would have no chance. So Canelo ducking a guy which would be considered, in my opinion, a mismatch. Not because of Errol Spence isn't a great fighter. It's because Errol Spence is just so undersized. And I don't see how he can stop Canelo. In his tracks. How can he stop Canelo from coming forward? And if Errol Spence is put on the back foot by Canelo, and Canelo's unleashing those body shots, you know, looking to break him down, how's Errol Spence gonna match? Like, nah, that's not a good fight, man. That's not a good fight. You know, Ugas at times, was hitting Spence, and you were like, whoa, you were on the edge of your seat. Now, imagine if Canelo hits Spence. You know, that's serious power, especially against a smaller man. That could do some serious damage. So, yeah, I don't think that's a realistic fight. Just like I don't think Canelo Usyk's a realistic fight. It's not realistic. I think the fight that's realistic is Canelo fighting Beterbiev and, what's his name? Spence fighting Crawford. They're realistic fights. They're realistic fights. And I actually think that Spence wants the Crawford fight. So I think that will happen. But you've got to understand, if Spence loses to Crawford, you see, if the Canelo fight is offered to Errol Spence, he may consider it because he knows if he loses to Crawford, the Canelo fight's dead. If he loses to Canelo, right, the Terence Crawford fight will still be there. However, you don't know what state you're going to be coming out of the Canelo fight. But the fact that Tom Brown's saying that they offered Canelo a deal to fight Errol Spence, that means Errol Spence was on board to fight Canelo. That means he would have been up for fighting Canelo. You can't really accuse Errol Spence of ducking Terence Crawford for fighting Canelo because Canelo would be a harder fight. But at the same time, you can. Because for me, nobody's talking about Errol Spence fighting Canelo. That would be a fight that would just come out of the blue. It'd be shock. But people are talking about Errol Spence fighting Terence Crawford. And you losing to Canelo doesn't hurt your legacy as much as it hurts you losing to Terence Crawford, because Terence Crawford is a guy your own size or even smaller than you. So you losing to him, that hurts your legacy massively. Losing to Canelo, people will say Canelo was too big. So it doesn't hurt him as much. So you can understand that the risk in terms of, from a legacy point of view, is far greater fighting Crawford. Because people expect him to lose to Canelo. They won't expect him to lose against Crawford. Crawford might be a slight favourite. But Errol Spence also has a very good chance of winning that fight. Against Canelo, it's slim to none. You know, so that's my take on it. Leave your thoughts. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. And I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.